how we approach our clients. And one of my things that I do with teaching is I try to explain to you the background of why we do something, not just to teach you what it is, but the background and how we got there. So I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that the reason that we have buyer agreements now is that, in the old days, if you go back into the 50s and 60s, we didn't even have listings. I mean, I would call Allison and say, what do you got? I'd call Dawn and say, what do you got? And then I'd pray I was going to get paid. And then finally we started having listings that had compensation, and then finally we went to a point where the MLS compensated us. But in those days, because of the MLS structure at the National Association of Realtors, we were considered agents of the seller, not agents of the buyer. So the whole concept of buyer brokerage or buyer agents was sort of foreign. And one of the things that happened is a lot of people didn't like to have to share their agent, if you will. So that's where the buyer brokerage came from. I got introduced to buyer brokerage 13 years ago when Molly Jansen, who's now Molly Jansen Graw, came, and I was her mentor. The only classes that were available immediately was an ABR class, the Accredited Buyers Representative classes. So I take her to this class, and we're sitting there for the 2 days. And first day we're driving home, and she goes, well, you've never put anybody in your car without a buyer agreement, have you? And I go, 100% of the time. I didn't even know what one was. I was like, wow. And for me, it was very scary. For Molly, because she learned from the day one that you did a buyer's agreement, it wasn't scary. So I think that's where you have to sort of think about. If you're newer in the business, this is going to be easier. If you're older in the business, it's a little bit more scary to do it. But I think what we can do is we work through some of these reasons of how we do it and stuff like that. Hi, David.
Right.
Then we can get to some of these things. You probably are going to have to leave that open because it's getting warm in here already.
If I can get it down.
Yeah.
Or Dawn? Oh, son, you did that. You're my.
Yeah, Dawn, can you get our back as your instructor passes out?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to talk about buyer. Now, understand, the new nomenclature is not buyer representation. It's actually buyer realtor agreements, because one of the things we wanted to always remind our clients is that we need to keep the realtor in the middle of the transaction. So the buyer realtor agreements, making sure you get paid. Okay, so what we're going to think about now when we talk about these different agreements is I want you to think about finding a buyer that you're going to list. You're going to make sure that this buyer is going to be with you and you're going to get paid. But you don't have to do it all at once, so we'll talk about it. I've always said, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So here's the elephant. Okay, so getting a ready, willing, and able buyer. First of all, we're all out there prospecting for buyers, and we all know in this kind of a market, buyers are more difficult, buyers are harder to find, buyers are two-timing us, buyers are working with other people, and also, and because I've been there too, since 1974, in this kind of market you sort of feel like, oh, it's a buyer, I better hang on to him. But what I wanted to have you do is I want you to try to think about whether or not you want to work with the buyers and have them working with you. So we'll talk a little bit about using agency as a qualifying mechanism and then going right into the buyer's agreement right after the agency agreement. So prospecting for buyers, how do you make sure that you're not going to waste time with your buyers? First of all, the old days of meeting a buyer at open house and jumping in the car and taking them to see something are gone. If you want to do business that way, that's great. I don't think it's very good. I think the thing you need to do is if you meet them at open house, that's great. Walk them into the office, get an appointment with them, be ready and prepared to do something. Of course, if they tell you they want to buy the house, you just showed them an open house, that's okay. Walk them into the office and do it. But you still have to do some of the steps. So the biggest thing is that when you get your buyers in front of them, you need to take some time with them. I tell my buyers, I'm going to need to meet with you, and we're going to need about an hour and a half or 2 hours of your time, because what I want to do is I want to sit down and we want to find out if we, and I always use the assumptive we, but if we want to work together. Okay, this is an important concept because you're going to find out there are buyers that you don't necessarily want to work with. I mean, parenthetically, I'll tell you last year, just in fact this last January, I let go of 2 buyers that were actually referrals to me because I realized after we got into the transaction more and more that they were not being forthright with, that they were basically lying, that they, were not the kind of people I wanted to be representing. And, you have to look at the commission today compared to a lawsuit tomorrow and think about, do I really want to be doing this, So I just basically rescinded my agency and moved on. The buyer's representation agreement is the second thing you're going to do with these buyers. The first thing that you need to do with anybody is what? The very first thing we talk about when we meet somebody.
Are you working with someone else?
Agency, you guys, okay? The very first thing that's going to be in any transaction file is what? Agency. I know the law says that I'm going to do my agency prior to contract, but you should be practicing to do your agency the moment you sit down with them. And why do we want to do agency the minute we sit down with them?
Find out if they're working with somebody else.
Find out if they're working with somebody else. And also, more importantly, find out if they're going to accept dual agency, right? How many of you have ever had a buyer that rejected dual agency? Okay, what happens? You do all your work, and what do you have to do with them?
Find another agent to represent the other side.
Yeah, and maybe take a referral fee, and that's about all you get for all your work, right? So, why not be smarter? I've always said that this business is more about working smarter, not harder. Why not immediately get your buyers in, sit down, you explain the agency, you get them to accept the dual agency. The way I get them to accept dual agency is I say, look, I work with the best group of brokers, we have the best listings. If I'm not going to be able to sell you our listings, then you're tying my hands behind my back. And the only thing I can do if I show you something that you're not going to accept the dual agency is send you down the street. If you want to go down the street or you don't want the dual agency, fine. We're going to do it now because I'm not going to spend my time with you. Okay, now I know this sounds a little bit hard-nosed, but I have, unfortunately, or fortunately, I have, 37 years of rejection behind me, and I know when people have basically messed around with me. So, find out right away. If they're not going to accept dual agency, fine. Send them down the street. Once they're accepting dual agency, you do the agency. Now, I'm not going to teach agency because I do teach agency, but let's remember what agency is. Agency is only a what?
Disclosure.
A disclosure. It is not a contract, is it? Now, if they will not sign your disclosure, because all you're asking them to do is sign that you explained this to them. If they will not sign your disclosure, what else is going on? Yeah, Sister Susie, Aunt Shirley, Uncle John, somebody's working with them. They're taking all of your time and your effort, and then you're gonna get the fatal phone call. Hi, Annette. We love the house you showed us, and Sister Susie's gonna write it up for us. You get a few arrows in the heart, and they bleed, and you get tired of that. So, use your agency as a qualifying mechanism. If they won't sign your agency, that's when I move on. I don't even go any farther. That's it. Okay? And then I go to the buyer's representation agreement. And so those two things together we're going to talk about. And we'll talk about the steps. You don't have to go for the throat the first time, but we'll work through it. Okay, so you got your initial contact, you build rapport, you chat it up, how many kids do you have, where do you live, how did you find this, what do you want? And at the same time, you're taking copious notes because you want to make sure you're on the right track. The reason you can't just jump into buyers sometimes is because buyers don't always tell you what they really want to do when you're not getting into the nitty-gritty. I mean, how important is how close you live to school? Things like that. Then you're going to find out, oh, we only want to live in da-da-da-da area or something like that. That's going to, say what you're going to do. Okay, make sure that they know what they want. I have had buyers that everything I showed them they loved. How am I going to sell my house if everything I show them they love? Because they're not going to discern anything, are they? All they're really doing is, and also, make sure you're dealing with both of the decision makers. When you're taking a wife out and the husband never shows up, but he will, he's really busy and he will show up, what are you doing?
Wasting your
You're wasting your time because what you're doing with her is what? You're keeping her busy and she's getting a lot of decorating ideas, right? I mean, seriously, So, think about that, both of the decision makers. Find out what you can do for them. One of the reasons I get people in the office and I take the time to do it is I say to them, look, we need to find out if we're going to work together, what our criteria is going to be, and then at that point in time, because I'm going to know what you're looking for, I'm going to be able to set up, a MLS search and things like that. You cannot set up an MLS search that's got every single thing from here to Palos Verdes. That's ridiculous. First of all, the MLS won't let you do it. Second of all, they're not going to be able to discern anything. So try to get their criteria down so when you do some kind of a search, you're down to, parameters of price and things like that. Ask them if you're going to help them. You say yes, just they're going to, no, okay, let's go through this. Okay. Stay general, don't get too personal. To find out when are they going to buy. Oh, you know, if we could find the right house, we'd like to move in a year or two. Great. You know, you're not my buyer, okay? I'll keep you in my list, but you're not my buyer. Find out who's the decision maker. This is extremely important with couples. Find out who's also, I think, in this day of communication, you need to know who's going to be your point person. And I'm very, very clear about that. Who am I going to be talking to? Who do you want me to email, text, or whatever, so that you have the person there, and then but also you find out by watching them who's going to be the ultimate decision maker. And lots of times it is the wife, lots of times it's the husband. Never know. Sometimes they make really good decisions together. And then you've got, you know, that's great because they'll say, well, we both want all of the information, we both want you to text us and things like that. Allison and I just worked with a young couple, really bright young couple that were my buyers. They wanted everything to both of them. And then they would talk, and then when they got back to me, we had a decision situation rather than me saying, oh, I don't know what he's going to do or she's going to do. We had this nice little funnel of information, so that works really well. Okay, find out about their real estate experience. Are they a first-time buyer or are they a seasoned buyer? One of the things I say to my seasoned buyers is, by the way, everything's changed from the last time you bought real estate. So welcome to the new club, you know, because it's not the same contracts. You know, your older buyers are going to expect the seller to do all the repairs and everything has to be in working order and all those things, because that's the way they did it the last time, right? You've got to go back to and you've got to show them that you know what you're doing, and it's going to be a little bit different experience. Also, you know, the whole question of wants and needs. Everybody wants, but then you have to get down to what do they really need. The other thing that I do with my clients is that at this point in time, I already have set them up with a person who's going to be doing their loan. I usually give them 2 referrals. I tell them that, you know, your loan person is just as important as I am because you're going to be living with them for the next 60 to 90 days also. And if I don't have a criteria as far as the loans, this is where you're going to have to do it. Because what's going to determine the most important thing for most people today is what? Price. And how can I get a loan? Okay? If we're under 729, we're probably easy to get loans. If we're getting up into what most of our properties are, you've got to figure out if they're going to be able to really buy. So know that. Okay, so then you've got to talk about your own business needs. And this is very important, and I think a lot of agents just don't do this. You have really got to ask the question, do you want to work with these people? Because we all want to work with everybody right now because we're all wanting to get deals together. I understand that. But you really have to say to yourself, is it better for me to concentrate on somebody else because I know this is not going to work out particularly well or whatever. Sometimes there's just personality conflicts, and if you pick up on that, I mean, lots of times I have referred a buyer that I've been given to somebody in the office because I just think there'll be a better personality mix or something like that. But think about that. Do you really want to work with them? Because you're going to be with them just as much as they're going to be with you. Okay, so what are you going to do? Talk about their ability to buy. Do they have a loan? Can they get a loan? Is there going to be any problems? What is their job security like? Things like that. Flexibility. Okay, so you want Hollywood Riviera and we can't find you anything that's big enough that you really like. Are you willing to talk about condos? And then first they're probably going to say, no, we'll never buy a condo, right? Usually what happens, you take them out and you show them the little tiny houses with little tiny kitchens, little tiny bathrooms, little tiny closets, and they've been living in a 2,000 square foot rental, and they go, we can't get into this. And what do? We have to switch them. But you've got to find out if they're going to be a little bit flexible on that. Motivation again, how are they going to do it? And then loyalty. Now, I asked the hard question, who else have you been working with? You'd be amazed. This young couple I had with Allison, they actually had been working with somebody for 7 months, had never even written an offer. They missed the best part of the market, quite frankly, with this other agent. And by the time I got them, everybody, you know, we were into a frenzy because everybody wanted the tax credit and things like that. But, you know, and then they were referred to me by some family friends. So, you know, but find out how they're doing. One of the things I always do, if you've been working with another agent, you're going to need to terminate that relationship. Because I will not work with you if you're working with somebody else. Now, this is a hard question, you know? But I just tell people, look, my time is valuable, your time is valuable. You are not going to get more information by working with more people. The only thing you're going to get, quite frankly, the way this community works, is you'll get a reputation as being a problem buyer out there. Because we all know that we have buyers that we've shared.